All right, today we're going to be adjusting valves on a 2011 Yamaha Grizzly 550. We're going to have the same tolerances on the 700 Grizzly and same procedure. So we've got a couple things removed here just to make this video a little bit quicker. We've got front and rear fenders off already. You do not have to remove those fenders to do this procedure. I would suggest removing the footwell, left-hand footwell, just so you can see what we're doing a little bit better here. You can get to your inspection cap a little bit easier and see that. So I'd suggest removing your footwell, and then obviously your left-hand panel here is going to need to be removed. Just to keep things simple, we're going to do our valve adjustments on this side here. So I'm going to remove this coolant reservoir, two 10mm bolts here. Remove this hose just to get this out of here. You can adjust your exhaust valves from the other side, so you don't have to remove this coolant reservoir, but two bolts was simple enough to remove that, so I didn't have to move the camera around. Next thing you're going to want to do is remove your cam sprocket cover here, and it's going to be two 8mm bolts. I've removed one of them already, just left this one in there loose. Take this cover. You don't actually have to remove this vent line here. We'll just tuck it back in there just so you can see what we're looking at here. This is your cam sprocket, and this is your cam chain that sits around the outside of that sprocket. We've got your intake valves on this side. We've got your exhaust valves on this side. To get to your intake, you're going to need to take your air box off. So there's going to be a cover on top of your air box. You're going to have to remove that cover. There's a 4mm Allen bolt that holds this boot onto your throttle body, so you're going to need to loosen that up. I suggest getting a longer Allen to get in there and loosen that clamp. Then you can just lift that air box off. That's going to give you a little bit of room, not enough to get in there and adjust valves. So I'd suggest taking 3 lines off of your intake. There's going to be 3 different lines going to your air box here, and they're all 3 different sizes, so don't worry about getting those mixed up. But you will want to remove those, and then a rubber strap up on the front of your air box. That's going to allow you just to pull your air box off completely. And then there's going to be an electrical line as well, just one of those. So once you get that air box off there, then you can get to your intake valves, and you'll have an 8mm ratchet or an impact to pull those bolts off of there. And then you're going to have a cover that looks like this. This is the exhaust side, but you're going to have the same thing on your intake side. And underneath there is going to be your valve adjustment. Now I'm going to show you how to find top dead center here, and this is important to find the correct marks on your flywheel so that you are adjusting your valves in the right position. You're going to want to find top dead center compression on your compression stroke. Okay, so you'll see if you're looking in your manual, you'll see a TDC, which is top dead center, and there's going to be 2 strokes that you have top dead center. That's why we pull this cover off here. There's a line on your sprocket that's going to be straight up in line with there's a tab on the top of your head here, and you want those to line up. Second thing you're going to want to look at is down here. Make sure your line on your flywheel is lined up with this line on your inspection window. So you'll have what kind of looks like there'll be 2 lines connected with a line in the middle, and then you'll have a separate line. And I'll show you that when we get finished adjusting valves, so you know exactly what that looks like. And then you're going to want to find a larger socket and a ratchet. This is a 7/8 socket to turn your motor over to find top dead center. Now, if you are on the wrong stroke, this line up here will be straight down. So you may have the correct line down here, but this line is going to be down. You want this line straight up, and that means you're on TDCC, which is top dead center compression. You want to make sure you're on that stroke when adjusting valves. If you're just doing routine maintenance, then and your 4-wheeler isn't hard to start, it isn't ticking really bad, when you're on the correct stroke, you'll have a little bit of clearance on both your intake and your exhaust. So if your line is down here, there's going to be lobes pushing down on your valves, and that's going to make those valve tolerances 0 because there's going to be pressure down on your valves. And so that's another trick. Just know that if your 4-wheeler is close to where it needs to be, you're going to have some clearance there when you're on top dead center compression. Now your Tolerances are here, and I'll leave this here for a little bit while you look at those. Got an intake 0.09 to 0.13 millimeters, and your exhaust is going to be 0.16 to 0.20 millimeters. So you're going to grab some feeler gauges, and I kind of try to find the middle of the line ones. So if we're doing intake, we'll find the 0.011 millimeters. And that's right. 0.0, there's 0.2. Sometimes inches is a little bit easier to find. And I guess we're doing exhaust. What did I tell you there? We're doing exhaust, so we'll find 0.17 is what we're going to find for exhaust. And that's kind of in the middle. We could find a point, oh, this is just about 0.18, which would be right in the middle of this exhaust. Now, give me a little hard to see from the angle that you are, but there's going to be an area in between your adjustment and your valves that you're going to be able to stick this feeler gauge. You want a little bit of drag in there, and I'll show you that. I'll bring that camera over there when we are ready so that you can see what that looks like. But you're going to slide your feeler gauge in there, and you're going to have a little bit of drag. And I'll show you what that looks like here. It's a really hard angle for you to see, but I'll switch it over to this other one. And you stick it in there and you have a little bit of drag. I realize it's very dark for you to see, but right now they're adjusted right exactly where they need to be. If they were not, you grab a 10 millimeter wrench and you loosen up the lock nut, and then there's a square screw on the top of there. And you will, so you loosen up the lock nut, you'll tighten that square screw down onto your feeler gauge until there's a little bit of drag. Then what I do is take a 10 millimeter wrench, tighten down my lock nut, and then pull my feeler gauge out. You want to make sure if it's extremely difficult to pull your feeler gauge out, then what you've done is tightened your screw too far, and you're actually putting pressure on that valve, which is not what you want to do. You want to make sure there is some free play in there, some tolerance in there. So you want to make sure that you can pull that feeler gauge out, no problem. Stick it back in, no problem. You want to make sure there is some clearance there. Now you do the exact same thing on the intake side, and then you can go ahead and put those covers back on. Make sure these O-rings are where they need to be, sitting in that groove. If you have an O-ring kit, you can replace those O-rings. If this is the very first time you've done a valve adjustment, those O-rings are probably going to be fine. Or very first time that a valve adjustment has been done on a four-wheeler, those O-rings are probably going to be fine. So you can go ahead and put those back on, 8 millimeter bolts to tighten those up. And then I put a grease rag under here because there will be a little bit of oil dripping, and that's fine. I just don't like that oil dripping onto the exhaust. Go ahead and put this cover back on. Obviously tighten up the intake where we did the exact same thing there, and then we can put the intake air box back on. Pull this, put your inspection cap and your cap that you turn your motor over by back on, and tighten those down, and then we can put our plastics back on. So that is valve adjustment on a Yamaha Grizzly 550 and the 700. If you have comments, make sure you leave them below. If you have questions, let me know. If you need parts, let me know. And if you want other videos done, please leave those in the comments, and I will try to do some videos of what you guys want. Thanks a lot.